When it comes to talking about Motionless in White, there was really only one tool that could truly get the job done. I present to you the Cringe Meter.
Oh my god!
That's right, we're ranking all 13 tracks of Scoring the End of the World by their cringe level, starting with Meltdown.
Go!
Now this one actually opens on a pretty decent note with the big screams against the kind of EDM-infused breakdowns and spooky synth melodies. Think a more modernized take on Orgy. It already gets a little corny with the first verse, but is generally catchy enough to make up for it at this point. Where it really sends my eyes rolling into the back of my skull is with the terrible hip-hop elements.
And now we're globally mourning, and it's too late for rewarding, it's too late. Run away!
I can sometimes overlook shitty lyrics with a decent delivery, but this LMFAO garbage is the worst of both worlds. Also, that line, "You can't spell virus without us," makes me die a little inside every time I hear it. Take that stuff out and it's not a terrible song, but as it stands, I'm gonna put this one at lame. Next up is Sign of Life, which has another solid intro with the chuggy headbanging guitars overlaid once again with creepy synth work. The singing is definitely on the emo side, which I can tolerate, but damned if they don't throw in more stupid hip-hop moments for good measure.
Cringe.
They're a little less distracting here, but take them out and you've basically got a Breaking Benjamin song with an admittedly catchy chorus. So yeah, you know where this one has to go. They could definitely do worse, but don't worry, they will. Werewolf was kind of a surprise though. This one literally opens with a howling wolf alongside the warbly synths and electronic beat, and the lyrics are about as obvious as you can get when running through the usual lycanthropy tropes, but it's presented in a relatively fun and inoffensive way. Not to mention the vocal performance is honestly one of Chris's best to date, and the composition actually on the more varied and dynamic side with some good attention to detail. Honestly, I kind of like this one. It's one of the least metal tracks on the album, but I think they genuinely put together a pretty good song here, so I'm gonna put it kinda good. That brings us to Porcelain with that big dramatic opening here with just the vocals and piano continuing the edgy boy musical vibes. And if you mash up Breaking Benjamin with Fall Out Boy, this is the chorus you probably end up with. Preteens everywhere will be crying in their dark bedrooms while belting this thing out, probably on TikTok. Another track that's not terrible, and even on the catchy side, just oozing with melodrama right down to the incorporation of strings on the chorus. It's over the top, but I wouldn't necessarily call it overly cringe either. It's pretty typical stuff, and cringe is a science, y'all. Like, we gotta make it real. So Breaking Benjamin core for this one as well. Next up is Slaughterhouse. So this was one of the more intriguing singles for me because it features Brian Garris of Knocked Loose, which is definitely a collab I never would have expected. I'm a big fan of his work, and his usual intensity kicks the track off on a particularly heavy note. And Chris actually does a decent job of matching him with a more blackened snarl, making for an interesting interplay between the two. Another decent clean chorus as well for what it is, and an absolutely pulverizing breakdown. I was actually prepared to praise this one among my favorites, but then they started dropping some truly grade A gems like this.
In the land of the free, you're a slave to your wealth.
And then much, much worse.
One mutilation under God.
Like, Chris, come on, you and I are the same age, but I stopped thinking that these types of lyrics were clever when I was like 18. So despite loving the heaviness and appreciating it as a smart move for both Knocked Loose to get more exposure and Motionless in White to maintain some scene cred, those moments are still landing it all the way off the charts here at mega cringe. Next we have another single in Masterpiece, and I already did an entire video breaking down this track, and I barely had much to say about it even then, when I had a whole runtime to just talk about it. In short, it's another pretty straightforward Breaking Benjamin ballad over some random breakdown that doesn't really fit. It's not maximum level cringe, but it's almost worse in that it's kind of boring and uninspired, which makes the title all the more humorous to me. So I'm actually going to put this one at lame.
Your music's bad and you should feel bad.
Cause of Death is another heavy one on here with lots of harsh vocals and even some D-beat, putting it more squarely alongside their old metalcore material. Great gang vocals too. It's still got one of their usual sappy melodic choruses, but to be honest, that's not all that different from a lot of those later era metalcore bands I was listening to in the late 2000s. I actually appreciate the alternations between styles, and it makes for some genuinely enjoyable moments. Corny, maybe, but not particularly cringe, so I'm gonna put it at decent, but that's not gonna last. Because next up we have the big, bouncy Marilyn Manson ripoff incoming with We Become the Night. It's almost shameless how hard Chris leans into a full-on impression at times with this one.
Rich get richer while the sick get sicker. The profits from the people feed the poor another needle.
And as unfortunate as it is to listen to that on its own, the comparison doesn't do the track any favors, coming nowhere close to classics from Hollywood or Antichrist Superstar. If you're gonna copy someone's work, you have to at least do it as good, if not better. Instead, it just becomes another teeny bopper FNAF-core anthem, a term that I was very proud of coining during my Ice 9 Kills review. Like seriously, put this track over one of those Five Nights at Freddy's animations and no one would think twice about it. Yeah, this one fucking sucks. I'm putting it at FNAF core. Burned at both ends too, so save for a few moments, this is another one of the better tracks on the album, I would say. Lots of solid guitar work here, especially on the very As I Lay Dying sounding choruses. Pretty strong vocal performance too, save for a few parts here and there. Not something I'm gonna go telling my friends about, but credit where it's due for a relatively solid track. I'm putting this one at decent. Flipping things again, we have BFBTG, Corpse Nation, and that first acronym stands for Broadcasting from Beyond the Grave. Just reading the title of this one made me cringe, and speaking of Ice 9 Kills, it has a very similar sounding intro, complete with the music box and news anchor narration that didn't help my first impression either.
Tonight's grim and ghastly tale. Corpse Nation.
Look into the darkness.
Try hard music for kids who exclusively read FNAF lore on Reddit while watching The Nightmare Before Christmas on repeat.
Was that the bite of 87?
Like, come on, I enjoy the latter, but you can also go outside every now and then. Toss in some random swearing and it's another edgy boy wet dream.
If truth makes you shudder, research this, motherfucker.
Not the worst thing on here, but it's definitely up there. This one's also going cringe level FNAF core. So that brings us to the big lead single Cyberhex that was the talk of the town when it dropped. I've mentioned before that when it comes to modern industrial metal, I don't think you can get much better than Three Teeth, but this isn't too bad either for something a bit more radio friendly.
I pull the sun from the sky to freeze the future of time.
I'll admit it's genuinely catchy, anthemic stuff with more cool flourishes in the songwriting to really flesh things out. The atmosphere is massive with the synth work, and then those beats are pretty great too, and it gets pretty damn heavy. Again, I could name dozens of things I would choose over it, but as far as what this album has to offer, it's definitely among the best, so I'm putting it at kind of good. But don't worry, we're really going to top ourselves here with Red, White, and Boom. Now this is what I'm talking about. Just when I was almost getting a little disappointed at the lack of truly top-notch cringe here, this one hit a fucking grand slam. Like, holy shit, how is this not a joke? Like, do some people just never grow up, or do they know that a lot of their fans are just around the right age to think that this is cool? It's another Manson-esque track with more terrible lyrics.
We ride the wheel of misfortune just like a carousel. We each are our own devil, and we make this world our hell.
And as if they couldn't let that Chucky track from the Silver Scream 2 take the gold medal for worst line, they also threw in this delightfully terrible moment. How is this real? And finally, the big dramatic titular closer scoring the end of the world. We've kind of circled back to where we've started here with another very orgy sounding track with lots of electronic elements and that overdone vocal inflection.
We score the final scene, adrenaline now coursing through our veins. Long live our symphony.
Maybe a touch of Linkin Park in there as well. Honestly, after that last one, this track feels like it could be Beethoven. But joking aside, it's fine. Not great, and it just sort of ends, but completely listenable. Mick Gordon also does guest guitars here, though I wouldn't have even noticed if I didn't know that ahead of time. I'm putting this right around Breaking Benjamin core. So, what have we learned here? Honestly, for one, this album overall is not as terrible as I thought it would be, and believe me, I've heard far worse. Much like that Ice Nine Kills album, there's plenty of genuine talent on display, it's just that the end result definitely isn't made for someone like me. That said, snip out some of the cringe, and I wouldn't mind hearing some of this stuff again on the radio, given that it wouldn't have been out of place there in the 2000s. I'm not feeling like giving it a final grade, but considering my previous rankings of their other albums, I do actually think I enjoyed this one at least more than Disguise or Graveyard Shift. Speaking of which, check out this video for my Motionless in White tier list, or this playlist for my picks for the most overrated metal albums of all time. But that'll do it for now. Flight of Icarus signing off. I will see you in the trenches.